Hello and welcome back to the Apex Gaming Invitational Qualifier here in Caldwell, Ohio. This event, a double slot qualifier for both the RCQ as well as the Apex Invitational happening in just a few months. I'm Tandy, joined by Ross Merriam in the booth. Say hi, Ross.
Hi, Ross.
You did it again. Just come up with new material, you know?
No.
We just...
the joke's good. We don't change.
All right, that's fair. 2 rounds in the books. We're coming into round 3. This is going to be a 7-round Swiss event followed by top 8. We're going to bring you all 10 rounds today of coverage. We just watched TJ Radizak, local FNM hero, take down his opponent playing Murktide. He was on Amulet Titan, and we're going to be watching Amulet Titan again. This deck, one that's very popular in Modern in general and very powerful.
Yeah, definitely one that has made a very good use of Modern Horizons 2 with Urza Saga finding Amulet Titan, so no surprise to see it doing well here in multiple players' hands. This time we're going to be seeing it in the hands of Cameron Armstrong, playing quite a different matchup, going from Is It Murktide last round, now playing against 4-color Rhinos, one of the more popular decks in our field today. Taking
also one of my favorite decks in the whole field.
Yes, taking advantage of a newly printed card from Dominaria United, and that is Leyline Binding. An important card, I think, in this matchup because it is a cheap, efficient answer to Primeval Titan. Can also take down early Amulet of Vigors, can take down Dryad of the Elysian Grove. So should be an important one for the matchup, and I think our players are ready to go.
All right, we're going to head down to the feature match area so they can go ahead and get started so we don't hold them up any longer. So... who do you got between 4-color Rhinos in the hands of Ryan Winans versus Amulet Titan from Cameron Armstrong?
There are force negations here on the Rhino side to help stop Summoner's Pact, but not a ton in the way of stopping Primeval Titan. You can answer it once it's on the battlefield, but with things like Solitude and Leyline Binding, but those triggers are usually pretty important.
All right, we're underway here. Cameron Armstrong leads with a Boral Grazer into Boros Garrison, but it looks like mulligan down to like 4 cards. Not a lot of resources to work with. Back Ryan Winans' way, suspends Crashing Footfalls on 1 off of a basic forest. Let's see if any more lands can follow.
Yeah, normally not a strong play here to suspend the Footfalls on turn 1, but against a 4-card hand, I'm not too upset about it.
Any pressure is good pressure against a 4-card hand.
Yep.
All right, Amulet of Vigor, the draw from Cameron. 4 mana on the table. Maybe more to come next turn.
So with a strong draw, there is the potential for a Titan next turn. Ryan Winans needs to be cognizant of that. Wouldn't be surprised if we see Teferi here bouncing that Amulet.
Also has Fire Ice in hand. Could choose to tap the Boros Garrison on upkeep, but maybe worth saving till later. Plus, getting the Teferi down now just lets you use all 3 of your mana this turn, which is a big deal for later turns. These 4-color Rhinos decks, this is like such a cool build because normally when you add 20 cards to your deck, it dilutes your strategy. But when the deck goes from Teamer to 4-color, you get access to Ardent Plea. Adding 4 more cards among those 20 to be more Cascaders actually sometimes makes you more consistent.
Yeah, and Leyline Binding, importantly, because its mana value is actually 6, does not get in the way of your Cascades, despite being a card that you can easily cast on turn 2. So it fits very well into a strategy like this. Ryan Winans actually opting to only play 3 copies of Ardent Plea, doesn't even want the full 12. Has plenty of other good cards to get in. There's also Omnath and Solitude that the White Splash enables. We do see a Solitude in Winans' hand that could potentially take care of a Primeval Titan or a Cultivator Colossus down the road.
Armstrong does not replay the Amulet, which leads me to believe that one of the last few cards in hand might be Beseiju, maybe saving that for something this turn, but not playing the Amulet's interesting.
It does have another bounce land there. Yeah, stops on the upkeep. This is going to be an ice. Doesn't want Armstrong to have access to 6 mana this turn.
I too don't know what any of those lands are.
I believe it is Gruul Turf, Boros Garrison, and Valakut the Molten Pinnacle.
All right, Amulet's the play, but no bounce land. Just going to play a Hanwar Garrison. It's interesting to see Boros Garrison and Hanwar Garrison in the deck because normally you play one or the other, right?
Yeah. Normally Hanwar Battlements pairs with the Valakut, and the point of playing it is so that you don't have to put Boros Garrison into your deck, and because you really don't need the white mana, and that lets you play more green bounce lands. Make you more consistent at casting Primeval Titan.
All right, fetch for a tri-land, end of turn. This is going to unlock domain. Going to go back Ryan Winnen's way with a Teferi on 2, Rhino coming off, suspend, and a handful of interaction. Let's see if that interaction is going to be good enough to slow down Cameron Armstrong's Amulet Titan deck. Here comes Crashing Footfalls. 2 Rhinos coming. And a draw.
Interesting that there's also no Sunhome in Armstrong's list. That would be another reason to have Boros Garrison.
All right, Teferi ticks up to 3. Ryan Winnen's hand looks to be full of things like Fury, backup Teferi, Time Ravelers. See if he wants to go ahead and play anything this turn that's proactive.
Awkwardly opting for a Teferi here when he had Teferi plus to 3 ready to draw a card next turn.
Yeah, but needs to just spend mana to interact at all. Bouncing the Amulet just slows down Cameron by 1 mana. It's not even that great. 5th lands. It always feels like the Rhino should be able to attack when they come off suspend, you know. Back in the day when you suspend one of the green creatures, you know, they always had haste when they came in, so it just feels a little weird.
Here's a Dryad of the Elysian Grove. We do have a Valakut on the battlefield, but can we get to 6 lands? You see, we know Winnens knows about the Amulet and the Forest.
All right, choosing not to play Amulets.
Is that a Simic Growth Chamber?
I believe it's a Besage You. Oh, it is a Simic Growth Chamber. Good call. So we're going to bounce a bounce line. This is going to trigger the Valakut to deal 3. And now Winnens can respond to that Valakut trigger with a Solitude or something to take care of the Dryad. And that looks like that's going to be the play.
Interesting, since that trigger wasn't doing a whole lot.
Yeah, just 3 damage. Not very scary.
Not going to take down a Rhino. Your Teferi isn't that relevant. And Winnens deciding, I mean, you're probably going to have to deal with it anyway, but you have Fury in hand. You could have waited and used the Fury and then had the Solitude still up. Perhaps a little bit of a bit too aggressive of a play there from Winnens, but still in very good shape here.
Yeah, just resource rich, you know.
Yeah, has Force of Negation and Brazen Borrower in hand, so can counter a Summoner's Pact off the top. Has plenty of pressure with these Rhinos, so Rhinos come in. Razor's going to soak up 3 of it. So Armstrong going to fall to 17.
Yep, and we're going to go ahead and play this Shardless Agent. That's going to allow for 2 more Rhinos.
That's
10 more power.
We got lethal damage next turn.
Yeah,
so that'll be
lethal damage next turn with Force Negation backup.
Yeah. So an aggressive play using the Solitude there, but one that Winnens could afford to make because he's so far ahead on resources here.
Yeah. Now you may be seeing cards like Fire Ice flip off. You know, these cards have a converted mana cost, or I guess mana value is the new terminology for it, of 4. And then, so that it actually just gets around the Cascade Clause. You know, these decks all get to play those kind of cheeky, they're not, you know, free spells, but they do dodge the Cascade mechanic, which is pretty sweet.
Winnens only coming prepared with 3 Rhino tokens instead of 4, so die there representing the 2nd token.
All right, Cameron. Looks like you drew Primeval Titan.
Well, that was best possible. And this is the most punishing case for using that Solitude.
Sure, but I believe a hardcast Force Negation here should just be good enough.
You're just going to counter the Amulet, you think?
I think so, because that means that, you know, the last card in hand is the Simic Growth Chamber, right? And so if the Amulet's not in play...
Ooh. Declines to do that. Though we do have a Petty Theft. So what exactly is Armstrong going to go for here? It still has a land drop to make, but can't really set up a Dryad here.
All right, well, it looks like we're going to bounce the Amulet of Vigor in response.
That's interesting because now we can't take the Primeval Titan off the battlefield. We are going to force a block, then the Fury can finish it off.
Yeah, I feel like that's the plan, and it's a pretty good plan. We can also do it pre-combat, too, so we actually... or it doesn't. Yeah, we get trample damage if he blocks a Rhino. And he has to block something because it's a lethal attack.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to get Talaria West and a bounce land. The bounce land is going to return the Talaria West.
Ooh, but we didn't play our bounce land from hand, so we're not going to have blue next turn. I guess you have the amulet still in hand. Okay, so we're fine there.
All right, Ryan going to go ahead and fetch end of turn. Let's see what the next turn holds.
And get, Ryan still, I think, now a little bit open to a strong top deck from Armstrong here.
Draw for turn. Doesn't have enough mana, I believe, to go for Fury and Force of Negation, so has to make a choice here. Gonna go for the Fury to clear the Primeval Titan more than likely. Fury starts by ticking up. All right, and Ryan seems like he knows that this is a force block, so this Fury pre-combat is going to guarantee that the Primeval Titan dies from a force block, and if he blocks Rhino, he gets 2 trample damage in.
That's going to be 1 short.
1 short, but I mean, Cameron still needs to draw something next turn. He's just going to go ahead and pack it in. Maybe we had life totals wrong. Maybe he just doesn't have any outs.
Yeah, I guess life totals were a little off, because we had 18 attacking there, and Primeval Titan can still soak up 2.
Yep.
So it was an attack for 16, but I guess 16 was good enough.
That's close enough. All right, we're going to be shuffling up our sideboard. You want to take a look at the sideboard for us and give us a little insight on how you think we'd sideboard? This matchup is pretty sweet here. Oh, Young Dingo, thanks for the raid. Young Dingo, a Pioneer streamer, or a variety Magic streamer, but has been playing a lot of Pioneer lately, and they've raided me a few times. I've tried to pay it forward. Cool person, and thanks again for the raid. Much appreciated.
Okay, so looking at Cameron Armstrong's sideboard here, this is our Amulet player. I see 2 Chandra Awakened Inferno, 1 Hall of Storm Giants, 1 Emrakul the Promised End, 2 Endurance, 2 Force of Vigor, 2 Veil of Summer, 1 Relic of Progenitus, 2 Dismember, 1 Boseiju Who Endures, and 1 Engineered Explosives.
Gotta imagine the Engineered Explosives coming in, right?
Yeah, that's the only thing that really strikes me. I think against traditional Team of Rhinos, you would suspect Blood Moon out of the sideboard and want some disenchants. But that's one of the downsides of going for the 4th color, is you no longer can play Blood Moon effectively. So that's a good news for Armstrong. That said, the Force of Vigors / Boseijus can still answer Leyline Bindings.
Right.
So maybe you want just some answers to Leyline Bindings, not sure. And then the Chandras can, potentially deal with creatures and take over a battlefield in a fair game.
It only does 3 though, right?
Yeah, that's
so
the
it
problem.
doesn't quite handle the Rhinos. So I wouldn't imagine that's mostly an anti-counter spell card, right? If you know your opponent has a ton of counter spells.
Seems like Armstrong came heavily prepared for control with the Chandras, the Hall, and the Emrakul.
Yeah.
And then not sure about the Veils. Could be good against Force of Negation, but there's not a ton of counter spells in the 4-color deck.
I think you just let it ride. I mean, I feel like the Primeval Titan deck is heavily advantaged in this matchup, and we just saw Mulligan to 4 just like not function,
Yeah. And then from Ryan Winnen's side, 4-color Rhinos, we got the Yorion as a companion, 2 Wear Tear, 4 Mystical Dispute, 3 Force of Vigor, 2 Endurance, 1 Brazen Borrower, and 2 Subtlety. Gotta love the subtleties.
Yeah, Subtlety's good. I think the big trick is trying to get some of the cards out of your deck. I think Dead Gone, Teferi, Time Raveler, like these cards are just like not that good against sorcery speed giants.
Yeah, there's a couple Endurances in the main that aren't great. You do want a good blue count, because you're going to have both Subtlety and Force of Negation in your deck. So there's a premium on blue cards as well. So you might see the Brazen Borrower come in as a threat that can be a blue card. Maybe cut some of these Furies. But beyond the Borrower and the Subtleties, not a lot I like here. Force of Vigor can hit Amulets and
Saga.
And Urza Saga, so maybe we want some Forces.
It also is Dryad of Elysian Grove. It's got some targets.
Oh, yeah. And Dryad,
targets that matter.
Dryad, too. Yeah, we definitely want Forces. So I like Forces. I like Subtleties for sure. Maybe the Borrower if we just want, if it's better than other blue cards.
Right. All right. Well, both players here shoveling up for game number 2 and getting their decks ready after sideboard. This matchup, I think, boils down to whether or not the Rhinos player can answer the Primeval Titan immediately, and a lot of the interaction doesn't really handle Primeval Titan directly. Things like Force Negation can be good for stopping an early Amulet of Vigor to slow them down. It can stop something like Summoner's Pact, but the meat of the deck is creatures, and Force Negation does not do well against creatures.
Yeah, and you do have, I think the White Splash certainly helps towards answering the creatures, the threats from the battlefield at least. with Solitude and Leyline Binding. So it's going to be the white cards that are important here, where I think we're going to see a trim on the red interaction, the Furies, the Fire Ices. And then, as you said, Teferis, also a piece of blue interaction, but definitely an awkward card for this matchup.
I know. There is some value to leaving cards in your deck that cycle and also can pitch to stuff. Teferi Time Raveler might not be a guaranteed cut. I think the only guaranteed cut for me is Fury. I think Fury is the one that is the weakest in the matchup. Doesn't kill Titan. You're never pitching it early to kill like a Boreal Grazer. Sometimes you can kill an Azusa or a Dryad of Leasing Grove on like turn 3 or 4, but that's not really where you want to be in the matchup.
Yeah, I'd rather have Force of Vigor at that point.
Yep. All right, looks like we're here for game number 2. Let's see if players are going to keep their opening hands.
We do see a Teferi in Winnin's opening hand, so some of those stayed in. Which makes sense. I agree that Fury and Fire Ice are definitely worse.
All right, looks like we're going to be taking a mulligan from Ryan's side.
Winnin's turn.
Yeah, no kidding. 4.
I see Azusa and Amulet in Armstrong's hand, so it could be a very explosive draw. That is a potential... if there's a Grazer and a Bounce Land, that could be a turn 2 type.
Well, let's see just how explosive Cameron wants to be. Turn 2 Titan is terrifying. That doesn't really happen too often, right?
I guess you need 2 Grazers, right? Turn 1 Amulet. Turn 2, you get to 3 mana. You play Azusa. You got 2 land drops left. You got 4 mana. I guess we need a second Amulet. Is what we need.
Yeah, second Amulet's always the cheat code.
Yeah.
It's like, how do we win? Oh, second Amulet. Because we can go Amulet on 1, Amulet on 2, plus Bounce Land, plus Azusa, plus Bounce Land.
Well, an awkward start for Armstrong starting on Valakut. Could have played Beseiju to play the Amulet on 1, and then the Valakut would have entered on, effectively untapped anyway. There is a second Amulet. No third land.
Wow. Explorer and no third land from Cameron Armstrong. And you got to imagine that if you're playing the Amulet Titan deck and miss a land drop early in the game, it's going to be tough sledding.
That said, with Azusa and 2 Amulets in hand, any bounce land is going to represent a ton of mana, and that's a Gruul Turf.
All right. So let's see if Armstrong can do it. Amulet means the bounce land is going to be tapping for 4, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but there is a Leyline Binding in Winnin's hand. Is going to be able to cast that. The Rogran Triome just needs to fetch and find any 4th land type.
All right, floating 4. Or sorry, trigger on the stack. So this trigger on the stack, Ryan is going to respond. We have the option for binding. We have the option for maybe even Force of Vigor here.
Gonna let him do it. So we got green, red now. So here's Azusa, likely floating green.
Ooh, this might be a pitch to kill the Amulets in response.
Yeah, I was wondering why we wouldn't respond to the Azusa.
Perhaps a misstep from Winnin's. This might cause some serious trouble. 2 triggers are still on the stack, so even doing this means that the untaps still happen.
Yeah,
so we get to float some mana.
Needed to respond to this Azusa. So we're gonna get this. Well, this gets us to 5 mana.
He bounced the bounce land instead of the Beseiju. He could have replayed the Beseiju for the 6 mana source, but kind of shortcutted it and returned the bounce land to hand.
Yeah, so we've made 2 land drops.
Right, but this is a tapped land drop.
Yeah. And we do have a Grazer, but that's not going to net any mana without the Amulets around.
Yep. Frustration on Cameron's face. Maybe he knows they made a pretty big mistake here.
Yeah, had 1 mana floating after the Azusa, made 4 with the Gruul Turf, so up to 5. Could have returned the Beseiju, played it as his last land. He had 1 more land drop to make with the Azusa, and gotten to 6 mana this turn, and that would have been huge. Now trying to figure out how to best set himself up.
Both players here just slight mistimings, slight mistakes, and you're seeing just so much riding on a single trigger, a single micro decision at basically all times in the modern meta.
Yeah, the format is so powerful these days that you have to be very careful with how you time things, how you sequence things, and it can make a huge difference. And we're seeing that here from both sides. So we make our last land drop, and now the Arboreal Grazer will let us put the Beseiju back onto the battlefield. Yep. But that's going to leave us at 4 mana with no real way to...
turns over, right?
Yeah.
Like we missed our window.
But even next turn, there's no draw that can get you to 6 mana next turn even. So it's going to take multiple draw steps.
Well, that's what happens when you make a mistake, You get punished and you move on with your life and try to draw out of it over the next few turns. But Winnin's hand looks gross.
And Armstrong's hand, I believe, is just Primeval Titan Summoner's Pact. So he's just waiting to get to 6 mana.
6 mana waiting room. But with the Azusa, bounce land lets him play the bounce land, replay the land, the Boseiju or the Valakut, and then next turn has 6 mana. So
yeah,
some life still, even sitting at 4 here, 4 mana.
Yeah. So it needs to find a bounce land and then get another turn after that.
All right, Winnen's here fetching, looking for the perfect land to turn on everything as well as unlock various spells in hand. Goes with the breeding pool. That's going to be land type number 4. Leyline Binding can cost 2 here. Could be the play. Maybe a Fire Ice on the Azusa. We'll have to wait and see. All right, here comes Leyline Binding. And target the Azusa. Going to get that out of here. So now just going to be running mana sources for Cameron. The only way to play that Primeval Titan over the next 2 turns.
Interesting use of the Leyline Binding too. After with no amulets, the Azusa's not super threatening.
Yep,
that's an awkward lander on the second Boseiju.
Rough. Now thinking about what's in deck for Summoner's Pact, decides to just pass the turn. Doesn't want to get randomly blown out, but that's going to leave space for Ryan here to play a Violent Outburst on the instep, and that's going to put some pressure on Armstrong.
That's the formula against linear strategies. Disruption, pressure.
Every day.
Force of Vigor and Leyline Binding, the disruption, Violent Outburst, the pressure. So we have, sort of assembled our own anti-combo.
Just think of Violent Outburst. Think of all the Cascade cards as Delver of Secrets. And then you surround Delver of Secrets with a ton of interaction. You allow this one card, pseudo combo of Crashing Footfalls off the Cascade as a pivot point. And you focus all of your pressure around that pivot point, and then all of your interaction becomes that much stronger because it forces your opponent to interact or die.
And there's a Fire Ice off the top, so some of those stayed in. Also got to see Wear Tears coming in. That'll also make sense. Not one we mentioned, but a good card for answering Amulet of Vigor, Dryad of the Elysian Grove, and there's a Saga, just like Force of Vigor.
All right, upkeep, we have an Ice, going to tap down the Gruul Turf. That's going to make casting Primeval Titan this turn basically impossible.
And this is a 2-turn clock at this point with Armstrong at 15. There's 8 power on the battlefield, so the draw steps need to be good and need to come quickly. I think was that another threat drawn?
A Dryad. Grove. So we can float a green, play the Boseiju, and play the Dryad, but that doesn't really put you any closer to casting the Titan next turn.
Yeah. I think we've got to hold the Boseiju, play the Dryad next turn as a chumper. Yep. Dryad will buy us a turn.
Can also kill Leyline Binding. Maybe that unlocks something with the Azusa. Maybe not.
Oh, there's another Violent Outburst. So Dryad no longer going to buy us a turn.
Yeah. Dryad not going to be good enough. We have Force Negation in hand as well, so we can stop Summoner's Pact. We can stop a couple of things. Maybe a Amulet of Vigor could be scary, but not currently with the board state. Steve drawn, Scourge Tribelter. Don't say that one too much these days, but against Tramplers, not so good.
Become a popular one in Amulet Titan recently.
I love a good Steve. You don't got to sell me.
The fact that you're able to find multiple Azuzas quite frequently these days, or not as multiple amulets, means that Steve can sit around on the battlefield and then sacrifice once the Saga finds the second amulet and generate lots of mana with a tapped land.
Well, we have a conclusion to this match. A second Violent Outburst end of turn does provide enough pressure for the Rhinos player to take down the match.